Urashima Taro, a Japanese folk tale for sleep. Close your eyes if you'd like, or simply let your gaze go soft, resting on nothing in particular. Let your body settle wherever you are. Let your shoulders drop. Let your hands rest open and still. There is nothing you need to do right now, nothing to hold on to. For the next little while, you are simply here, listening and resting. Tonight, we are going somewhere very far away, down through the surface of the sea, past the place where the light changes color, past the place where the water grows cold and dark, down to a place that exists in the oldest layer of the Japanese imagination, a place where time moves differently, where beauty is permanent, where the seasons exist all at once, and the world above is very far away and very small. This is the story of Urashima Taro, one of the oldest and most loved tales in Japan, a story that has been told for more than 1,000 years, appearing in the ancient chronicles and the poetry collections of the 8th century, before it settled into the form that has been passed down to every Japanese child ever since. It is a story about kindness and its unexpected rewards, about the strangeness of time, about the particular sorrow of returning to find that the world has moved on without you. But tonight, we will live inside it slowly. We will feel the cool water of the sea. We will hear the sound of the waves. We will walk through the 4 seasons in a single room, and we will sit beside the young fisherman as he watches the world. He new becomes something he no longer recognizes. Breathe in slowly and let it out. Let the day go. There is nowhere else to be. There was once a young fisherman who lived at the edge of the sea. His name was Urashima Taro, and he was the kind of person who is remembered not for anything grand. He did, but for the quality he brought to ordinary things, the patience with which he worked, the gentleness with which he moved through the world, the particular way he had of paying attention to what was in front of him and responding to it honestly, without calculation. He lived with his mother in a small house near the water. The house was not much to speak of, a low structure of old wood and tile, its walls dark with years of smoke from the cooking fire, its garden small and carefully tended, the kind of garden that a person makes when they do not have much space, but want to bring the world into what space they have. Outside the garden wall, the sea began. Not gradually, not with a long beach and rolling dunes that give you time to prepare yourself, but almost immediately, the way the sea begins in some parts of Japan, where the mountains come down close to the coast, and the water starts where the land ends, without apology. He had grown up with the sound of it, the particular sound of this sea, the particular pitch and rhythm of these waves on this shore at this time of year, was as familiar to him as the sound of his own breathing, something he had stopped noticing, the way you stop noticing the sounds of the place you have always lived and only become aware of them again when you are away for a while and then return. He fished every day, out in the early morning, before the light had fully arrived, when the sea had the quality of something that is not yet decided what color it will be, and back in the late afternoon with whatever the sea had given him that day, sometimes much, sometimes little, always enough to feed himself and his mother with the small amount left over to trade for the other things a household needs. He was not unhappy. This is worth saying clearly because the story of Urashima Taro is sometimes told as if he were a man searching for something that his ordinary life could not provide, as if the adventure that came to him was a response to a dissatisfaction that had been building in him without his knowing. But that is not quite right. He was content. Content in the particular way of people who have found a life that fits them, that asks of them what they are able to give and gives back to them what they need. He was simply a young man at the edge of the sea, doing the work of his life, paying attention to what was in front of him, living the days as they came. One afternoon he was walking along the shore when he came upon a group of children. They were clustered around something on the sand, bent over it, poking at it, with the absorbed and slightly cruel attention that children sometimes bring to small creatures they have found and do not yet know what to do with. He came closer. On the sand between them was a sea turtle, not large, not small, the size of something that had been alive for a few years and was still young enough to be vulnerable, still young enough that its shell had not yet reached the thickness and hardness of a fully grown animal. It was alive. Its eyes were open, tracking the children's movements with the patient endurance of something that cannot leave and is decided to wait. He did not lecture the children. He did not make a scene of it, did not point to the turtle and explain why they should not do what they were doing. He simply asked them, in the way that a person asks when they are genuinely curious rather than accusatory, what they were doing. The children, startled by the adult presence, gave the kinds of answers children give, uncertain, partial, trailing off. He listened. Then he reached into his pocket and brought out a few coins. Not many, not a grand gesture, just enough to be interesting to a group of children whose attention could be redirected by something more immediately appealing than a turtle on the sand. He held out the coins. The children looked at the coins, then at the turtle, then at the coins. The calculation did not take long. When they had gone, he crouched beside the turtle and looked at it for a moment. Its eyes looked back at him, dark and calm and very old, the eyes of a creature whose relationship to time is different from the human relationship to time, who lives in a slower rhythm, who has been doing this for longer than memory. He reached out and picked it up gently, feeling its weight, the smoothness of its shell, the small movements of its legs against his palms, and carried it to the edge of the water. He set it down where the waves could reach it. The turtle paused for a moment at the edge of the sea, as if orienting itself, as if remembering something it had almost forgotten. Then it moved into the water and was gone. Several days passed. He went out in the mornings and came back in the afternoons. He ate with his mother and slept and rose again. The sea continued in its ordinary way, giving what it gave, taking back what it took, indifferent to the small human lives on its edge, in the way that all large things are indifferent to the small things that live beside them, not hostile, simply vast. Then one morning, as he was sitting in his boat, with his line in the water, something surfaced beside him. A turtle, large this time, fully grown, its shell the color of deep water, its movements the unhurried movements of a creature that has been alive for a very long time and has stopped being in a hurry about anything. It looked at him. He looked at it. There was a quality to its attention, something in the way it held itself in the water, something in the steadiness of its gaze that made the looking feel mutual in a way that the looking of ordinary animals does not usually feel. Then it spoke, not in the way that animals speak in ordinary life, which is to say, it did not speak at all in ordinary life, but this was not ordinary life, and in the particular space of this story, the turtle spoke. It said, "I am the one you saved." It said, "You returned me to the sea when the children would have harmed me, and I have come to bring you something in return." It said, "There is a place beneath the water, a palace, a kingdom, a place where the princess of the sea makes her home, and I have been sent to take you there, if you will come." He looked at the turtle for a long time. He looked at the sea around him, the familiar water, the familiar sky, the line of the coast that he had known his whole life. He looked at his fishing line, hanging in the water, doing what it was supposed to do. Then he pulled the line in, set down his pole, and stepped onto the back of the turtle. The turtle moved into the water, and the water rose around him, and for a moment, just a moment, there was the cold shock of submersion, the gasp of something unexpected, the instinct to resist, and then that passed, and he could breathe. In dreams, this is unremarkable. In this story, it is unremarkable. The turtle moved, the water held him, and the breathing continued, and the world above the surface became a memory almost immediately. The descent was slow, not plunging, not falling, but descending in the way that a feather descends, or the way light descends through water, losing itself gradually in the deepening blue. The color of the water changed as they went deeper. At the surface, it had been the color of the morning sky, pale, almost silver, reflecting more than it contained. Deeper, it became green, the particular green of coastal water that has depth to it, a green that suggests all the life it contains, without showing it directly. Deeper still, blue, a blue that deepened steadily, each shade darker than the last, until it became the blue of something that had never seen sunlight directly, but held the memory of it, the way very deep things hold the memory of what formed them at the surface. And then the palace appeared. It appeared the way things appear in dreams, not gradually, not as a distant shape that grows larger as you approach, but suddenly, completely, all at once. There it was, gold and silver and jade green, its towers rising in the water with the particular quality of things that do not need air or light to be what they are, self-sufficient, self-illuminating, lit by something that was not sunlight, but served the same purpose, a warmth that came from within the structure itself and radiated outward into the surrounding water. The gates were open, figures moved inside, not quite human, not quite fish, the inhabitants of a place that existed outside the categories of the world above. The turtle carried him through the gates. The sea in Japan is not a single thing. It is many things, depending on where you are, and what time of year it is, and what the weather is doing, and how deep you look into it. In the old province of Tango, on the coast of what is now called the Sea of Japan, in the northern part of what is today Kyoto Prefecture, the water has a particular quality in the early morning, before the sun is fully up, before the day has fully committed to itself. It is gray then, mostly, not the gray of something dull or absent, but the gray of something that contains all the other colors and has not yet decided which to be, a waiting gray, a gray that is paying attention. The fishermen who went out at that hour knew this gray well, were comfortable in it, had learned to read its variations, the slightly lighter gray of calm water, the slightly darker gray of depth, the almost invisible difference between the surface and the sky above it in those first moments of the morning. As the sun rose, the color changed. First a warmth along the horizon, not yet orange, not yet gold, but the suggestion of warmth, the intimation that something warmer was coming. Then the colors arriving, the sea going from gray to silver to blue, in a sequence that happened the same way every morning, and was somehow new every morning, the way things that are always the same are nonetheless always new, when you are actually paying attention to them. He had paid attention to it every morning of his life. He had watched the sea change color more times than he could count, had sat in his boat in the slow brightening of the morning and watched the water do what the water always did, and felt the same quiet, something that he felt every morning, which was not quite gratitude and not quite wonder, but something between them, something that did not have a name, but was real. This was what he was leaving. When the turtle carried him down, when the water rose around him and the surface disappeared above, this was what he was leaving behind. The particular quality of the morning sea in the particular place where he had been born and grown up and become the person he was. He did not know, going down, that he would not come back to it. The princess was waiting. Otohime, the name means something like daughter of the deep, or princess of sound, or daughter of the sea. The name carries in its syllables the quality of water and depth and beauty that the person bearing it was said to embody. She was everything that the stories say she was, but the stories, trying to convey beauty of this kind, always run into the same problem. The language of beauty is not sufficient for beauty that is genuinely beyond the ordinary. You can say she was beautiful, and mean it completely, and still have conveyed almost nothing. She welcomed him, not as a guest exactly, not with the particular formality of a host receiving a stranger, but with the warmth of someone who has been expecting you and is glad you have arrived, who has made preparations not because courtesy requires it, but because the person coming matters to them. She said, "You have been kind to one of our own." She said, "The sea remembers kindness." She said, "Stay with us for a while. Rest, eat, let us show you the world beneath the water, and when you are ready to return, we will bring you safely back." He looked around the palace. Every surface was worked in something precious, not in the way that human palaces are worked in precious things, with the heaviness of wealth asserting itself, but in the way of the natural world, where what is beautiful because it is what it is, not because it was chosen to make an impression. Shells of every kind, coral in colors that had no names in his language, fish that moved through the corridors of the palace as naturally as birds move through the corridors of a forest, as if the palace and the sea around it were not separate things but continuous, the boundary between inside and outside more suggestion than fact. He breathed. He was very far from the shore, he knew, and yet he was not afraid. The palace had its own version of night, not darkness exactly. The palace did not go dark. The light that came from within its walls did not extinguish at a particular hour the way a lamp extinguishes when someone blows it out, but the quality of the light changed in the hours that corresponded to night above. Not that anyone in the palace tracked the time above the surface, but there was something in the palace that responded to the rhythms of the world above it, some sensitivity to the turning of the earth that expressed itself in the light. In those hours, the light of the palace became softer, warmer, more interior, as if it had shifted its attention from the outward to the inward, from the display of the palace's beauty to the more private business of being a place where living things could rest. The fish slowed, the constant movement of the sea, the ceaseless small adjustments of the creatures that lived in it, the tail strokes and the small turns and the ongoing negotiation between each creature and the water around it. All of this slowed in the palace's version of the night. The large fish settled in the sheltered spaces of the palace's lower rooms. The smaller fish gathered in the coral formations at the edges of the rooms, their silver sides less bright in the softer light, their movements reduced to the minimum that keeping alive required. The water itself seemed stiller. Not still. Water is never entirely still, but less actively itself, more like something that is resting than something that is doing. He slept in these hours, not always easily. The strangeness of the place, the unfamiliarity of the sounds and the light and the quality of the air. These things disrupted sleep at first, in the way that any new place disrupts sleep at first. But gradually, he found it, found the rhythm that the palace offered, the particular quality of rest available in a place where time moved differently, where the urgency of the world above could not reach, where there was nothing he needed to do and nowhere he needed to be except here, in this room, in this light, breathing the air of a place that was entirely unlike any place he had been before. On the first day, Otohime showed him the palace, room after room, each one different, each one containing something that was not available in the world above, some quality of beauty or stillness or strangeness that the world above, for all its abundance, did not seem to have thought of. But the room that stopped him, the room he returned to in his mind long after they had moved on, was the room of the four seasons. It was a single room, large enough that its four walls could not be seen simultaneously from its center, and each wall opened onto a different world. The eastern wall showed spring, not a painting of spring, not a representation, but spring itself, as if the wall were simply absent, and beyond it lay the actual season, the actual light of a spring morning in Japan, where the cherry blossoms are at their fullest, and the air has the particular quality of a world that has just remembered how to be warm. The blossoms moved in a wind he could not feel. Petals fell in the slow, unhurried way of petals that have done their work and are now simply returning to the place they came from. The southern wall showed summer, the thick, heavy green of full summer, the green that has been building since spring and has arrived at its fullest expression, the green of a world that is completely alive and knows it. Cicadas sang somewhere in that summer, their sound coming through the opening the way all sounds come from a distance, a little reduced, a little softened, but recognizable, the particular sustained note of a Japanese summer that is as much heat as it is sound. Water was visible. A pond, perhaps, its surface covered with lotus flowers, red and white, their petals open to the summer light, in the particular way that lotus flowers open, which is fully and without reservation. The western wall showed autumn. The light was different here. The long, angled light of autumn afternoons. That particular gold that seems to be saying something, seems to be making a point about the quality of what remains when summer has passed. The leaves were turning, not all at once, the trees at different stages, some still green, some already brilliant in the reds and oranges that Japanese autumn produces, in colors that people travel from other countries to see, colors that seem impossible for something made of biology rather than pigment. The northern wall showed winter, snow, the particular quality of a Japanese winter morning when the snow has fallen in the night and the world has been simplified. The complex textures of trees and rooftops and paths all covered in the same white, the same even, patient white that makes everything look as if it has been waiting for this and is now finally at rest. He stood in the center of the room and looked at all four walls and felt something that had no name, the feeling of a person who has been shown something that the ordinary world does not usually allow you to see. All of time, all of the year, all of the turning of the seasons held still and present simultaneously, available all at once, none of it requiring you to wait. The days in the palace were unlike any days he had known. They had a different quality of time to them, not slower exactly, not faster, but differently organized, as if the usual architecture of a day had been rearranged into something that felt more spacious, less sequential, as if the things that happened did not have to happen in a particular order, and did not have to end before the next thing could begin. He ate. The food was unlike anything available on land, not because it was exotic, not because it contained unusual ingredients, but because it had been made with a quality of care and a quality of knowledge that produced in each dish exactly what the dish was trying to be, without excess, without lack, a kind of perfection that was not the perfection of effort, but the perfection of understanding. He slept in rooms whose walls were the colors of deep water and whose ceilings showed the slow movement of the sea above. The light filtered through many layers of water, arriving as something gentle and diffuse, and entirely unlike the light of any room he had slept in before. He talked with Otohime, not about anything in particular, not with the agenda of people who have things they need to accomplish before the conversation can end, but in the way that people talk when they are in the same place for reasons that do not require justification, when the talking is its own reason. He was shown more of the palace, the rooms he had not seen on the first day, the parts of the structure that extended into the sea around it, the places where the palace ended and the open ocean began, and the way that boundary was not a wall but a gradual diminishing, the architecture becoming less dense, more open, until there was nothing but water and the creatures that moved through it. He watched the fish. He had watched fish his whole life, had pulled them from the water, had handled them, had understood them as food and as livelihood, but he had never watched them like this, in their own element, doing what they did when no one was watching, the way they moved together, the shoals of small fish turning in unison, their silver sides catching the light simultaneously, the whole school bending and reforming in continuous response to something he could not perceive, was one of the most beautiful things he had ever seen. The turtle in Japanese culture is not simply an animal. It is a symbol, one of the oldest and most consistent symbols in the Japanese imaginative tradition, appearing in stories and paintings and poetry across more than 1,000 years with the same basic set of meanings, the same cluster of associations that the culture has decided to attach to it. The turtle lives a long time. This is the primary fact, the biological fact, from which all the symbolic meanings follow. A sea turtle can live for decades, sometimes for more than a century, moving through the ocean with the unhurried confidence of something that has no reason to hurry, that has more time available to it than it will ever need. In Japanese tradition, the crane lives 1,000 years, and the turtle lives 10,000. These are not biological claims, but mythological ones. The numbers chosen not for accuracy, but for what they express. A longevity so far beyond the human as to be effectively infinite. A relationship to time so different from the human relationship as to constitute a different kind of existence entirely. The turtle knows things we do not know. This is what the longevity implies, not just more time, but more experience, more accumulation of the particular wisdom that comes from having been alive in a changing world for long enough to see the patterns. The turtle that came to Urashima Taro was not simply returning a favor. It was doing what turtles do in the Japanese imagination, serving as an intermediary between the human world and the world beneath the water, between the ordinary time of human lives and the different time of the sea, between what is known and what is possible. He did not understand this when he stepped onto its back. He understood it only later, or perhaps never fully understood it, perhaps only felt it, the way you sometimes feel the significance of something that happened to you, without being able to articulate what the significance is. He had been kind to a small creature on a beach one afternoon, and the sea had remembered. Then, one day, after how long he could not have said, though it felt like days, felt like a week perhaps, or a little more, he thought of his mother, not for the first time. She had been in the back of his mind the whole time he had been here, a presence that he had not attended to, because the present was so demanding, because the palace and Otohime and the fish and the 4 seasons had filled his attention so completely that there had been no space for what was not here. But now there was space, and into that space came his mother, came the image of her at the small house near the water, going about the work of her days without him, the cooking and the cleaning and the mending, the mornings when he did not come home with his catch, the evenings when she waited. He went to Otohime. He said, "I have been happy here." He said, "There is nothing in the world above that compares to what is here." He said, "But I am thinking of my mother, and I need to go back." Otohime listened. She did not argue. She did not tell him he was wrong to want this, or point out what he would be leaving, or suggest that his mother would understand, and that he should stay. She simply listened, and then she said, "I understand." And then she said, "There is something I must tell you, before you go." She said, "Time moves differently here, The days you have spent in the palace are not the same as the days that have passed in the world above. She said, I cannot tell you exactly how long you have been gone. Time is not precise in that way, between here and there, but it has been longer than you think. He looked at her. She looked back at him with the expression of someone who is delivering news they cannot change and can only make easier to receive by delivering it with care. He thought of his mother. He thought of the small house by the water. He thought of the sea he had fished his whole life, and the shore he had walked his whole life, and the particular quality of the light on the water in the early morning when he went out. He said, I need to go home. Ryugujo, the Dragon Palace. The name in Japanese carries more than the translation conveys. The character for dragon, the character for palace, together producing something that is not simply a royal residence under the sea, but something older and stranger, a place at the intersection of the human imagination and the ocean's depths, where the mythological and the geological meet. In the oldest versions of this story, the versions that appear in the 8th century chronicles, before the tale had settled into its familiar form, the place Urashima went to was not called the Dragon Palace at all. It was called Tokoyo no Kuni, the Eternal Land, the Everlasting Country, the place where time does not pass, and death does not come, and the seasons are always at their most beautiful moment. This is a very old idea, the idea of an eternal place that exists somewhere just outside the reach of ordinary human life, accessible only to the extraordinary, only to those who have been chosen or who have done something that sets them apart from the ordinary course of human experience. Every culture has a version of this place. The Greeks had their Elysian fields, the paradise at the edge of the world, where the heroic dead lived forever in a version of life perfected and made permanent. The Celts had their Tir na Nog, the land of the young, across the western sea, where a human who found their way there could live without aging for what felt like a short time and was in fact centuries. Japan had Tokoyo, the eternal land, the place beneath the water where Urashima Taro spent his days, watching the fish and walking through the 4 seasons in a single room and talking with a princess who had been waiting for him longer than he knew. These stories persist because they speak to something real, not a real place, but a real experience. The experience of being so completely absorbed in something beautiful, so completely present in a moment that is unlike ordinary moments, that time seems to stop, or to move differently, or to become irrelevant to what is happening. Every person who has ever been completely, wholly present in a moment of great beauty or joy, every person who has looked up from something that absorbed them completely and been surprised to find that hours have passed, that person has been, briefly, in Tokoyo. Otohime brought him a box. It was lacquered, the deep red of old lacquer, the kind that has many layers and many years in it, the kind that is warm to the touch and catches the light in a way that simpler surfaces do not. Its lid fitted perfectly, the particular perfect fit of things made by people who understand their craft completely, where there is no gap, no wobble, just one surface meeting another as if they were meant to be together. She held it out to him with both hands. She said, "This is for you, to take with you when you go." She said, "But there is one condition. She said, "You must never open it. Whatever is inside, whatever you might imagine is inside, whatever the box might seem to promise, do not open it." She said this simply, without drama, without the emphasis that would have suggested she knew what he would ultimately do. Simply, "Do not open it." He took the box with both hands. He felt its weight, the weight of something that contained something, though what he could not know, the weight of a mystery that was asking to remain a mystery. He looked at Otohime. She looked back at him with an expression he could not read, something between sadness and affection, something that contained within it the knowledge of what was about to happen, and the choice, made again, not to prevent it. He bowed. She bowed. The turtle appeared at his side, and he turned toward the gate of the palace, and began the long ascent back through the layers of water to the world above. The shore looked the same, or almost the same. The line of the coast was familiar, the shape of the hills behind the village, the way the water moved against the rocks at the edge of the beach, the particular quality of the light on the sea in the afternoon. All of this was as he remembered, but something was different. He could not have said immediately what it was. It was more a feeling than an observation, the feeling of a person who has returned to a place they know well and senses, before they can articulate it, that something has changed. He walked up from the shore. The path was there, the familiar path from the water to the village, the one he had walked every day for his whole life, worn smooth by his feet and the feet of others who had made the same journey. But the path was different, not in its route. It went where it had always gone, but in its surface, in its edges, in the way the vegetation had grown up around it, in the particular state of overgrowth that happens when a path is not walked for a long time. He came to the village. The village was there, but the houses were not the houses he knew. Or rather, they were in the right places. The general arrangement of the village was the arrangement he remembered, but the specific houses, the specific walls and roofs and gates, some of them looked older than he remembered. Some had been replaced entirely. Some were simply different in ways he could not account for. He looked for his house. He found the place where his house had been. There was a different house there now, smaller, newer, belonging entirely to people he did not know, and who, when they saw him standing in front of it, looked at him with the mild curiosity of people looking at a stranger. He asked an old man he found near the well whether he knew the family of Urashima. The old man looked at him for a long moment. Then the old man said, "Urashima." He said it the way people say the names of things that exist in stories rather than in life, with recognition, but a recognition that belongs to a different category than the recognition of something known personally. He said, "I know the name. It is from a very long time ago. My grandfather's grandfather spoke of a family by that name. They lived here once, many generations past. The fisherman Urashima Taro. There is a story about him, that he went away to the sea and never came back. He walked through the village that was not his village. The streets went where the streets had always gone. The same general arrangement, the same relationship between the well and the temple and the path down to the sea. But everything that had filled those streets with a specific quality of a place he knew was gone. Not the geography, the people. This is the particular grief of this story, not the aging, not the physical transformation that the smoke from the box brought, but the moment before that, the walking through the village, the asking the old man, the understanding arriving not all at once but in pieces, each piece a small additional loss. The house is different. The neighbors are not the neighbors. The old men at the harbor are not the old men he remembers. The children running in the street are the grandchildren of the grandchildren of the children he knew. He is not lost in an unfamiliar place. He is lost in a familiar place that has become unfamiliar, which is a stranger and more complete kind of lost. He asked after his mother. The old man paused when he asked this, paused in the way of someone who is trying to work out how to deliver something difficult to someone who does not yet know how difficult it is. He said, the Urashima family. He said, there was a woman, long ago, the mother of the fisherman who disappeared. She waited for him. For a long time she waited, going down to the shore every morning, watching the sea. He said, she is part of the story too, the mother who waited. People remembered her kindness, the patience with which she kept waiting, long after any reasonable hope had passed. He said this gently, with the consideration of a person who understands that he is speaking of someone the stranger before him might have known. He did not know how right he was. He stood at the edge of the sea with the box in his hands. The sun was going down. The sea was doing what the sea does at the end of the day, taking on the colors of the sunset, the golds and reds and deep oranges of a sky preparing itself for night, returning them in its own way with the slight softening and shifting that water applies to everything it reflects. It was beautiful. It was the sea he had known his whole life, and yet it was not the sea he had known his whole life, because the life he had known had been lived 300 years ago, or 400, or however many years had passed between the morning he stepped onto the turtle's back and this afternoon when he stood at the water's edge with no home to return to and no one who remembered him. He looked at the box. The lacquered surface caught the last of the light, the warm red deepened by the setting sun, the lid fitting perfectly. The mystery of what was inside contained and sealed as Otohime had intended it to be contained and sealed. Do not open it. He had not forgotten. He had not forgotten the instruction, had not forgotten the way she said it, had not forgotten the expression on her face when she handed it to him, the expression that knew, perhaps, that the instruction would ultimately not be followed, and gave it anyway, because the alternative was not to give it at all. He opened the box, not immediately, not carelessly, but deliberately, the way a person does the thing they know they should not do, when the not doing has become more impossible than the doing, when the weight of the unknown has become greater than the weight of whatever the knowing might bring. A white smoke rose from the box, cool and thin. It curled upward in the still air and dispersed slowly, moving away from him in the direction of the wind that was coming in off the sea. And as it dispersed, something happened to him. Something moved through him from the outside in, like the smoke itself entering and doing its work, and the years that had not touched him while he was in the palace came for him all at once. The sea was still there. This was the thing, above everything else, above the changed village and the unknown faces and the old man's careful words. The sea was still there, unchanged, doing what it had always done. He walked back down to it, not because he had a plan, not because he knew what he would do there, but because it was the thing that was still familiar, the one element of the world around him that had not been replaced by something he did not recognize. The sea was the sea, the same water, different water, in the literal sense. The water that had been here 3 centuries ago had long since moved on, exchanged itself with the wider ocean, been evaporated and rained down somewhere else, and made its way back. But the same sea, the same relationship between this coast and the water that met it, the same sound and smell and quality of presence. He stood at the edge of it. The evening light was doing what evening light does, taking on the particular warmth of a sky that is preparing for night. The sun low enough now that its light was traveling a longer path through the atmosphere and emerging amber and gold, rather than the white of midday. The water reflected this, all the surface of the sea in front of him, all the way to the horizon, which was very far and very clear in the way that horizons are clear at the end of a calm day, was the color of the sky, gold and amber and deepening rose, the water holding the sky's colors, the way water holds things, faithfully, with a slight wavering, slightly more beautiful than the original. He held the box. He was not yet thinking about opening it. He was thinking about the sea, about all the mornings he had gone out on it, all the years of the water and the light and the catch, all the evenings when he had come back to this shore with the day's work done, and the house waiting, and his mother at the door. He was thinking about how all of that had happened here, in this exact place, in this water and this light, and yet had happened so long ago that it was now a story, the kind of story old men tell about the people who lived here before living memory. He was thinking, I am the story. Let us stay for a moment with this, with the question of time in this story, which is the question that the story has always been asking, beneath the turtles and the palaces and the lacquered boxes. Time is the central fact of human life, not in the sense that we talk about it most. We talk about time mostly in terms of not having enough of it moving too fast, of the deadline and the appointment, and the schedule that organize our days into units, and make the days themselves feel like containers for things, rather than things in themselves. But in a deeper sense, the fact that we move through time in one direction, the fact that we cannot go back, the fact that the moments we inhabit are leaving even as we inhabit them, become in the past while we are still inside them, requiring us to hold on to something that cannot be held. Urashima Taro's story is about what happens when you step outside of time's ordinary movement, when you enter a place where the usual rules do not apply, where the days pass differently, where you can look at all 4 seasons simultaneously from the center of a single room, and then return. The return is the heart of the story, not the adventure, not the palace, but the coming back, and the discovery of what has changed while you were away. What has changed is everything, not the hills, not the sea. Those things move at a pace so slow as to be invisible over a human lifetime, but the people have changed entirely. The specific people who made the world what it was, his mother, the neighbors, the old fisherman he had grown up beside, all of them are gone, replaced by their descendants and their descendants' descendants, people who carry the genes of the people he knew, but none of the memories, none of the accumulated particulars of specific lives live together. This is what time does. Not the dramatic things, not the disasters and the catastrophes, but this quiet, inexorable replacement of one generation by the next, the world staying in roughly the same shape while the people who inhabit it are entirely exchanged at a pace that is invisible from inside a single life, but undeniable from outside it. Urashima Taro came back from outside time and saw this clearly, saw what the people still inside time cannot see, what requires the kind of distance that only an impossible journey can provide. Let it all soften now, the shore at the edge of the sea, the children and the small turtle in the sand, the long descent through the changing colors of the water, the palace of gold and jade and coral, the four walls showing spring and summer and autumn and winter all at once. Otohime waiting, the days that passed like days while above them centuries turned, the box, red lacquered, perfectly sealed. The shore again, the village changed, the old man who remembered a name from a story rather than a person from his life, the white smoke rising, the years arriving. Let it dissolve gently, the way the smoke dissolved, dispersing into the sea air, thinning until it was part of the air itself, invisible, present without being locatable, the way all things that have happened become part of the atmosphere of a place without being visible in it. There is something in this story for sleep, not the loss, not the ending, but the palace, the place beneath the water where the seasons exist all at once, and time moves differently, and the days are spacious, and the present is fully present, without the usual urgency of the present, pressing it toward the future. That is what sleep is, a place outside the ordinary movement of time, a place where the days you carry with you, the worries, the plans, the unfinished things, wait outside the door, patient and unthreatening, available again in the morning, but not here now. Tonight, let yourself go down, not through water, through stillness, through the gradual deepening of the quiet that sleep makes possible. Let the colors change around you as you descend, from the bright surface of the waking day to the softer, deeper tones of the place beneath. Let the seasons be simultaneously present in the room of your dreaming, the spring that is somewhere in you, and the summer, and the autumn light, and the patient winter, all of it there, none of it requiring attention, simply present, simply what it is. There is nothing left to hold tonight. You are warm, and you are still, and you are exactly where you should be. Let your breathing slow. Let the quiet take you the way the water took him, gently, without force, down into the place where the ordinary rules do not apply. Rest well, sleep well. Good night.